Major Glenn Miller, director of the U.S. Air Force Band, is missing on a flight from England to Paris, it was announced today.
The sudden and mysterious disappearance of Glenn Miller, one of the most well-known band leaders from the 1920s through the 1940s, has been a source of fascination to many who have sought to make sense of the whole event that led up to his disappearance. Along with two other people, the plane that had Miller in it vanished, never to be seen again. Over the years, there have been several conspiracy theories that have tried to make sense of the situation. But everything has just changed with the recent discovery of an aircraft by a fisherman, which has been found to be the missing aircraft. So what actually happened all those years that has sparked interest in Miller's disappearance? Let's find out. Ever since Miller broke into the spotlight, he has been a source of fascination, as people were well taken by his musical skills that has brought joy and inspiration to many. Just like most people, Miller had a humble beginning, born Alton Glenn Miller on March 1, 1904, in Clarinda, Iowa. His name Glenn originally had a single into it, but his growing musical career necessitated a change somewhere along the line. His passion for music became clear at a very young age, and his whole life has been a move towards the realization of that dream. Glenn's adventure started very much earlier, when his parents, Mattie Lou and Louis Elmer Miller, made frequent moves in a bid to make ends meet for the family. This exposed Glenn to different people and ways of living, which birthed the desire for adventure and the need to break away from norms that characterized his later career, making him stand out in an otherwise crowded field. At the age of 5, things took a more stable turn when his parents finally settled in North Platte, Nebraska, where they decided to anchor their family and take a shot at life. At this time, Glenn was taken by the growing trend in jazz music at the time, which inspired him to get involved and take a shot at making his own music. He started honing his skills early enough, and his parents were willing to back his dream in any way they could. However, owing to the family's modest means at the time, they couldn't afford the instruments that Glenn needed to further his learning. However, Glenn took the bull by the horns by saving up from his side job milking cows to get his first instrument. Just then, the beginning of something great started, though Glenn might have been oblivious at the time. Despite their modest means, Glenn's parents were so keen on making sure that he got the best education that they could afford. His journey began in North Platte High School, where in addition to academics, Glenn took every opportunity that he could get at the time to practice his music. The first instrument that Glenn laid his hands on was the trombone, which, as we mentioned earlier, was bought with the money that he made from his side jobs. Despite being used, the instrument served Glenn well, helping him nurture the fire that burned in him. He was 11 at the time and already had the will of an adult. Over his life, this will eventually pay off, leaving him as one of the most recognized figures in the music industry. While in high school, Glenn focused on nurturing his talent and already made moves to join the school band. His instructors recognized his talent and were willing to guide him. Over the years, the trombone will become a trademark for Glenn, who fell in love with the instrument. However, there was a downside to the whole obsession with music. Glenn's academics suffered for his passion. As Glenn progressed, it became clearer that his academics were in the way of his self-discovery. Just like any parent would, his parent hoped that having a college degree would provide him with a clear career path, and they sent him to the University of Colorado in Boulder in 1921, where he was meant to further his education. However, Glenn was more driven by his music than any other thing. Focusing on classes became harder, as he sought more musical adventures. While at the University of Colorado, Glenn scouted for new bands that he could play with. This provided the exposure that he needed to build a life as a musician. While at it, Glenn played with Boyd Center's band, which was based in Denver. He was also known to have made several trips to Los Angeles, where he met up with other aspiring musicians and explored the endless opportunities that came with the career. This way, he nurtured his passion, providing a fertile ground for his dreams to mature. By 1923, Glenn had to drop out of college due to his poor performance in his classwork. which came as a huge shock and disappointment to his parents. However, there was very little they could do at the time, as Glenn's career was already giving signs of a promising start. Glenn had a lot more time on his hands to move on with his career, and there was nothing that could stop him now. Despite the determination that Glenn had at the moment, the road ahead was still filled with uncertainties and challenges. However, it was the beginning of a legend, which would later go down in the annals of history. He experimented by playing with several orchestras, where he was committed to finding his own unique sound. Despite not being much at the time, this allowed him to get more used to different sounds and how they come together to form something really pleasing to the ear. This would later help him venture into compositions. Due to the growing popularity of jazz in the 1920s and 1930s, the music industry was filled with quite a number of people who struggled to stand out among the crowd. This provided very competitive ground for Glenn, who struggled to be seen just like every other person. Later on, he would realize that he needed to differentiate himself from the crowd in order to forge ahead. Before then, he stuck to taking up different gigs that helped polish his talent. While at it, Glenn got a gig to play with the Ben Pollock Orchestra, which was a major milestone in the development of his career and the building of his personal brand. Not only did Glenn promote himself as an exceptional trombonist with the group, but he also pulled attention to himself with his newfound ability to arrange music. This drew a lot of commendation from his peers, who saw what Glenn could become. This development became evident under the guardianship of Ben Pollock, who was a big name in the music industry in the 1920s. His exceptional skills rubbed off on Glenn, who became the best version of himself under him. Soon, Glenn's capabilities were becoming really popular within the industry and opened more doors for him to get many other gigs that aided with his development and later breakthrough. Within the 1920s and 1930s, he worked with popular orchestras like Red Nichols, Paul Ash, and Ray Noble. With each group, Glenn unlocked a version of his talent that was better than the last, guiding him through the journey of self-discovery. He not only learned the trends at the time, he got new ideas that would help him move a step ahead of the growing crowd that surged around jazz. Not long after his outings with several orchestras, Glenn got the hunger to develop his own thing. With other orchestras, he is forced to conform to styles that he may not agree with. But if he was able to start something he could call his own, then there would be room to make things go his way. So, by 1937, Glenn took on the challenge of forming his own band, the Glenn Miller Orchestra, which turned out to be a huge success. With the advent of Glenn Miller Orchestra came a new challenge. Just like the time that he was looking to find his place with other orchestras, Glenn was again faced with the challenge of competing with bands that already established their reputation. The pressure to keep the group together grew by the day, and Glenn needed every strength that he could muster to keep things going. They struggled to find deals, but this didn't last for too long. Along the line, Glenn discovered that the charm would be to create something that was totally different from the trend. Doing the same thing as every other person and expecting a different result wasn't the way to go, and with his own orchestra, there was no one to stop him. Glenn soon went to work trying to find the silver bullet that would change his fortunes. He worked on new arrangements and soon hit the jackpot. He found his unique sound with the clarinet-led reed section, which he modified to suit his unique sound, the Glenn Miller sound, which took the industry by storm. Soon their new sound started to pull the attention of some big players in the game, leading to a major break in 1939, when they signed a recording contract with RCA Victor. With RCA, the band went on to record some sounds that became huge hits, forever writing their names in history. One such hit was Moonlight Serenade, which quickly became a sensation, putting the band in the spotlight. With this came a series of other hits like In the Mood, Tuxedo Junction, and Chattanooga Choo Choo, which established Glenn as a talented bandleader at the time, earning him wide recognition. The early stumps that the Glenn Miller Orchestra experienced in the starting stages were soon forgotten, as they became more widely known in the United States and beyond. Their fame soon spread across Europe, particularly the United Kingdom, when their music became a staple for everyone. By the early 1940s, there was rarely anyone in these climes that hadn't heard about the band. With the fame came a host of new opportunities that further cemented Glenn's place in the industry. He got into the big leagues and got the opportunity to collaborate with the top bands in the industry, among which was the Dorsey brothers, Tommy and Jimmy. This way, they were able to capture new fan bases and add to their ever-growing fans. This birthed some other collaborations, which even went beyond just the music industry. Speaking of collaborations beyond the music industry, by the 1940s, Miller and his team got offers to feature in some Hollywood productions, which was a testament to their wide appeal to the audience. Among their appearances, there have been two major motion picture appearances, which include Sun Valley Serenade, which was released in 1941, and Orchestra Wives in the following year. This helped showcase Miller and his band to a new audience, further spreading the word about his talents. People got attracted by Miller's new sounds that didn't totally mimic the jazz sounds of the time, adding their own unique elements that made them stand out. While many applauded them, some others, especially some of his colleagues at the time, believed that he was deviating from the norm, which wasn't acceptable to them. In all these, Miller maintained his focus on his career and never looked back for once. Looking back at Glenn's development over the years, from a young boy in a modest family to a boy who honed his talents through high school and college, it becomes clear that he has written his name in gold in history. He has become a symbol of resilience and focus, inspiring new generations of musicians even decades after his demise. With Miller's popularity at the time, one could only imagine the shock on everyone's face when they realized in 1944 that the creator of the music that they had all come to love and cherish had disappeared, never to be heard from again, in what was probably a painful crash. However, his memory was kept alive by his crew, who continued with the Glenn Miller Orchestra even long after his death. Over the years, there have been several failed attempts to make sense of what had happened to Miller, all to no avail, as there was no evidence to substantiate any of the claims. However, all these changed in 2019, when a shocking discovery was made about the unfortunate events that led to Miller's disappearance. Want to find out more? Join us as we unravel the events that led up to the disappearance. By 1942, Miller was already at the apex of his career, which was soon disrupted by the breakout of World War II. Then he made a decision that shocked everyone by joining the United States military, where he joined the war efforts. This, however, was the beginning of the end for Miller. He didn't give up on his musical career. Instead, he contributed to lifting the spirits of the soldiers with his tunes. When Miller first joined the Army, he was assigned to the Army Specialist Corps, but those in charge soon found out the value that he held and transferred him to the Army Air Forces, where he was tasked with shaking up the traditional Army music, which did little or nothing in inspiring the troops at the time they were needed. With his track record, this challenge was one that Miller was equal to, and soon started making impacts in the military also. With Miller in charge of the Army Air Force's Training Command Band, transformations were bound to happen. The band was soon playing a modern and more unique tune that helped keep the spirits high during such a gloomy period. The band's radio broadcast, "I Sustain the Wings," soon became a favorite to their audience, a testament to Miller's growing influence. Miller had brought the same transformative energy that he used in the making of the Glenn Miller Orchestra to the military, and the results were there for all to see. Soon, many began to recognize the contributions that Miller made to the military. General Dwight D. Eisenhower in particular was taken by the transformation and acknowledged the role that music had to play in the war efforts, being one way to maintain the morale of the men fighting the war. This appreciation went beyond the military to include even civilians, who were taken by the transformation that came with Miller. However, things were soon to take a very ugly turn. which shook everyone that came to know Miller. By 1944, Miller had made it to the rank of a major in the military and was still very much in charge of the Army Air Forces Band in England. By December of that year, the Allies were ready to make a final push on Nazi-occupied Europe, which Miller saw as an opportunity to take his music to the front lines, where it would help prepare the soldiers for the tasks ahead. This necessitated his planned trip to France, where he would join the other troops. So on December 15th, Miller was aboard a single-engine UC-64 Norseman aircraft, which left England and was headed to Paris. This was the ill-fated flight that changed everything. Along with 2 other people, Miller braced for the bad weather and embarked on the flight, despite warnings of the potential danger. Sadly, the plane never made it to France. This fact wasn't realized until 9 days after the departure date, as the focus was shifted to the intense battle that broke the following day. After the ruse, it was discovered that the plane never made it to Paris, which was a hint that they must have faced an unfortunate outcome, with the signals lost over the English Channel. As there was no clear definition of what might have happened to the flight, rumors started to fly, as people made futile attempts to explain what might have happened. These soon turned into conspiracy theories, with the most accepted version being that the plane might have encountered some mechanical issues as a result of the bad weather, which might have resulted in a crash. The official military investigation concluded that Miller's plane likely went down due to poor visibility and icing on the wings. This, however, didn't stop speculations that continued to gain traction at the time. Some believed that the plane might have been shot down by a German anti-aircraft fire, while others believed that Miller might have been involved in a secret mission that went south, leading to his capture and assassination. However, there has been no evidence to back any of these claims. For decades, there has been this air of uncertainty on the matter. But a discovery that was made in 2019 by a fisherman has changed the trajectory of these speculations, finally showing some promising insight into what might have happened to the ill-fated flight. The wreckage was pulled off the coast of Dorset, England, which was around the same area where the flight was believed to have disappeared. Tigar's involvement included analyzing the wreckage and revisiting historical records to determine if the debris could be from the UC-64 Norseman aircraft that Miller was aboard. Their work aims to either confirm or rule out the connection between the discovered wreckage and Miller's plane, potentially providing closure to one of World War II's enduring mysteries. Although definitive proof has yet to emerge, Tigar's meticulous approach has brought new attention to the case, reigniting public interest and hope for solving the decades-old mystery. Do you believe that we are onto something with this discovery? Or will this be another dead end for the investigation into that unfortunate flight? Let us discuss this in the comments, as we hope to hear your thoughts on the matter. Till next time, make sure to check out other amazing videos on the channel.